Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Eve. What's great about this Daily Run is that it goes to Mega Satan, and I've been so happy to actually get an objective that isn't Mom or Mom's Heart, because I tend to think that a lot of people, I wouldn't say exploit the dailies, but more like take the time to actually persevere through breaking the dailies so they can actually get that huge stage bonus. Not too long ago there was a thread which just proved for daily discussions and mainly people expressing their opinions on what they feel maybe is a bit unfair or maybe what is fair, maybe which changes need to be made. And it has reached Nicholas and Edmund, so they're maybe considering some of the changes that they make. But I would like to maybe talk about a few of those because I think it's important to raise awareness, and perhaps if you haven't seen that thread, I would give you like a little bit of a rundown of what is going on. So there were a few complaints which I mainly make throughout my videos, and it's something that a lot of people who actually play the daily seriously agree with. And these things are mainly with regards to how the scoring system works. So not a lot of people actually have a problem with the game and how it's designed, the variance, but mainly with how you actually gain score as you progress through the levels, and maybe which changes need to be made. So the first one is swag bonus. A lot of people, including me, think that the swag bonus is too high. And I would say that the biggest argument for why I think it's too high is that it just doesn't make any gameplay sense. If you think about swag bonus, it's okay, sure, maybe you get a 99 of every consumable and it should cap there. That seems like a very natural point at which to stop, but also if you just imagine playing this game normally, so let's say that you play in a single player, if you have 99 keys, is it really worth your time to go back and pick up an additional key knowing that you're not gonna get anything in return? And even that, when you think about it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And even if you have something like 90 keys, oftentimes it's not worth actually pick up an extra key which drop on the floor because usually it's not worth it. So what I think would be a very natural, good idea in order to maybe prevent this is that the first key that you get up gives you the most points that you get out of consumables, and of course every subsequent key gives you maybe a linearly or exponentially less points, which means that if you have something like 90 keys and 90 keys, the difference would be smaller than if you had 1 or 10 keys. Obviously this difference still wouldn't be huge or in points, but it would cap out naturally at 99 of every consumable, and that way you would prevent people from breaking the game. And not just breaking the game, if you capped it off or at least introduced this exponential or linear scaling into the consumables, amount of the consumables you have, it would result in people having vastly more differences, or not differences, but it would have more potential and focus on other aspects of the scoring system instead of just the consumables. And I think if you did it this way, it would not only encourage just a smart way to actually use your consumables, but it would also encourage a way to maybe use the 2 of cards, which are now currently, I wouldn't say useless, but they lose their effectiveness past a certain point. So you can imagine that now suddenly, if you have something like a 2 of clubs, and you obviously would want to have 50 bombs to use them, but the difference between having something like 50 bombs or 30 bombs is pretty significant. It doesn't happen often, and maybe it's just down to how you manage. Maybe it makes a difference whether you bought that BOGO bombs item or not, but if someone has BOGO bombs or whatever, they just manage to find more bombs for whatever reason, if they decide to use the 2 of clubs in that situation, that would just increase or double their consumables and double their points subsequently. But obviously if you had something like linear scaling, the person who had less bombs would obviously still have less points, but the difference between someone who had like 50 or 30 bombs at the start would be smaller. And I think that's something that we should strive for, and maybe we really should focus more on things like how well you can dodge, how well you can utilize the items, and how well you can apply the knowledge that you have to the game so you can get the biggest benefit out of it. I definitely think that breaking falls into that category, and I definitely think it shouldn't be removed from the game, but I definitely think that some amends should be made. The other thing that a lot of people focused on was the stage bonus, or at least the points that you get for just going through the stages, and they thought it's not a good idea that if you go to Mama and you find an Ava's rune, that you should actually get beyond the initial objective, so just cap it off there, because what's ridiculous, in my opinion, is that if you go to the Dark Room at Depths 1, you essentially get the same amount of points for just going there, than if you maybe perform on a daily and just beat Mom and go to Boss Rush, and that's really discouraging, because that means essentially going to the Sacrifice Room and going to the Dark Room takes no skill at all, but going to the Boss Rush and beating it without taking a lot of damage obviously does take some skill, and I think those points should actually be more accountable and taken into account in the end scoring system. But what I think still is that AWA's runes then wouldn't really have much of an effect because of how big of a role exploration bonus plays in the whole daily. So what I think would be a much more reasonable change is keep the AWS runes, keep the way to actually go deeper past the initial objective, but don't reward the stage bonus for going there. So instead of getting an extra 4,000 points for going to Womb 1 from the Depths 2, just keep the exploration bonus the same and just keep the consumables bonus the same. That way people could still opt to go to the next floor, and they would have to make a decision. Is it even worth keeping this AWS rune? And you would have to make a judgment in your head, because every time you go deeper, the floor tends to be harder. So if you're not strong enough at that point to tackle the floor, maybe getting that exploration bonus or the consumable bonus wouldn't be worth it. That would still reward players for going there and actually finding ways to break the game, so to say, and go deeper, but it wouldn't reward them to the point where people who didn't find those ways or maybe focused on other aspects of the run, it wouldn't allow them to essentially just be over them and wouldn't leave the other player not to be unable to compete. And I think that's something that's very important, because I think you should make a conscious decision. So should I keep this 2 of Clubs card or the AWS rune? And obviously, if you think you're a good player, if you think your run is strong enough, keep the AWS rune, go one floor deeper, get the exploration bonus, maybe get an item from the secret room which gives you keys or whatever, and just get more chance of getting a consumable bonus. But if you know that maybe you're not that good of a player, you just might stick to that 2 of Clubs, and you say, I'll just collect as many bombs as possible and I'll use that in the end. And that difference in points, because you get something like 1,000, 2,000 points, depending on how many bombs you have, obviously, prior to using the 2 of Clubs, you get that. But also just in exploration bonus, let's say that you get something like 80 or like say 50 to 100 points for exploring a room, and let's say there's like 20 rooms in total, that would equate to something like 1,000 points in the end, maybe something like that. So that means that everyone who even decides to go deeper and gets like a 1,000 or let's say 2,000 extra points for going there would still be ahead and be rewarded for finding a way to go deeper and being brave enough and maybe good enough to not take damage. But even if a player did go deeper but decided to play badly, you would still be able to complete even if you didn't go there. And with all of the other changes that the people have proposed, I think this would be a much more fair solution, but also it would allow for much more strategy and also much more thought and decision between going deeper and maybe not going there necessarily. And if you don't enjoy this aspect of the game, you can just focus on other things, and that will still allow you to compete, or at least that's the theory. Obviously, we'd still have to play it and see how it actually turns out before going there, but that's the main gist of it. The second or the last thing that I would like to talk about is that a lot of people are against breaking, and not only because the Shrek bonus is too high and because it allows you to go deeper into the stages and get a lot of points that way, but it's tedious, it takes a lot of time, it doesn't necessarily take skill, it just more takes patience and just knowledge about the game, which I do agree with, that it should be measured in some quantity, but I definitely think that knowledge should be measured in how well you can swap the items around, maybe where you leave them, maybe how cautious you are with the use of your consumables, and I think in those regards you're rewarded by your knowledge or by knowing where to place bombs and to get the secret rooms and second secret rooms. Those are the things that matter, and I think those are the things that we should strive to actually do. But things like knowing how to break the game is something that I think is innately embedded into Isaac, and I'm not saying remove it, obviously. I'm not saying that we shouldn't reward that, because obviously if you break the game you can still get very strong, you can get a lot of items which will help through your run, and you can still get a lot of consumables that way, but it just won't make that big of a difference as opposed to people who didn't break the game. And I think that's the main point that we are all trying to make here. But breaking the game, especially the restock machines that exist inside the shops and the treasure rooms, I think they have no place in dailies. They make up for too much variance. It depends if you find bombs. It also depends not just on that, but it depends on when you decide to stop. Stopping at different points and intervals in time can end up resulting in you having a very different run, and that's basically due to no skill or decisions made on their own. Definitely think that there should be some other amendments in how the whole system and Isaac works, but I think that would take too much time and too much effort to actually fix. So the easiest solution, or maybe the best solution in this case, to me just seems like to remove the restock machines and the reroll machines and just leave us basically to get the items that we're gonna get out of the devil deals or item rooms or shops or whatever. Another thing that maybe is addressed or falls into the same category here is that the devil deals change depending if you enter them from the devil room, from the boss room, or if you enter them first from something like the chest or the Joker card. That again is just down to variance. It doesn't really reward good play at all. I definitely think the devil deal should be the same no matter where you enter them from first, and that's something that I wish they could change, but then again, I don't know how embedded into the system that is. I don't know how hard that would be, and I guess I would be okay with that staying in the game if all of the other things were changed and amended, but that's the main gist of it. One of the other things that I think a lot of people mentioned as well are the D4 and the D100 effects, and basically anything that rerolls your run. don't really have a place in dailies, because they do encourage you picking them up and just essentially rerolling until you get a strong run. What I think they should do is maybe have a finite amount of uses, something like 3 or something like that, and that will still leave you up to the decision at which point you want to stick with your run and reroll, so it would always be that risk versus reward. But I think in the extreme case you could just remove it and just forget that those items even exist. Remember that this is supposed to be somewhat of a competitive mode, so to say, in Isaac, that allows people to compare their scores to others, but while there's so much variance in it, it's really impossible to do that. And I definitely think that the most fun that we have in these dailies is just talking about them, just seeing how the different runs went differently and how they went wild. And in order to persevere that, I definitely think that these balance changes have to be made very carefully, because you still want to have that variance, innate variance that people experience, and maybe different decisions leading to different outcomes. You just don't want those differences to be so big where one is just ahead of the other player, with other player having no chance to catch up. And I think that's definitely the main point I'm trying to make with this whole video. With that said, what I did here in this particular daily, I didn't really talk about it, but it did connotate to what I was talking about, just the overall state of the game. What Afterbirth Plus introduced is a very cheeky way to break the game and just go faster, which removed the initial idea for dailies at all, because you always had to make a decision. Should I go fast enough to actually get to Boss Rush and Harsh, as opposed to maybe not figuring out where or how to go that? Maybe I will intentionally skip some rooms just to get to that, and that was a very big part of decision making whenever you were playing dailies in the past. But now if you just get some restock machines, or maybe if you get a restock item, what you can do is you can force Mama Mega. And not only Mama Mega, you can also force Diplopia. So what you do is use Diplopia and Mama Mega, you use one Mama Mega on the Depths 2 floor, and you use the other Mama Mega on the Harsh floor. This leaves you with the ability to essentially explore every floor to the fullest, and you're not stranded for time at all, because Mama Mega opens both Harsh and the Boss Rush door, which allows you to get in there, just beat them, and obviously with restock and having a lot of money, you can just get a very overpowered run and beat all of them essentially immediately, and it's not a problem at all. And that just removes every skill from the equation, because it just allows you to trade your patience in for a way to get a lot stronger. And obviously this is a much more favorable strategy than just going fast and trying to do everything as fast as you can. That's not to say that you can't rank well if you necessarily don't do these things, because I've never done them before and I still manage to rank in the top 50 most of the time. But if you do them, it removes a lot of the skill out of the equation, it removes a lot of the decision making, which I think is what all of us as players love. Obviously we can just opt not to do them, and but that's not really a solution, that's just us adapting to the environment, and I think that's the right idea to go about them. In this case, that's exactly what I did. I Diplopiated Mama Mega, I used one on the Womb 2, not Womb 2, Depths 2, I did Boss Rush, and then I used another one on Harsh, I beat Harsh, and that's just how it went. I was able to actually get the full expression bonus for all of those floors between those, between Depths 2 and Womb 2, which allowed me to essentially get a lot of points in general. It allowed me to break the game in a way where I just had a really powerful run, and it also allowed me to just find ways to get 99 of every consumables, and with the jar I used that to break the game by getting a lot of hearts. And that allowed me not only to get a ridiculous amount of points, it also allowed me to essentially do it as slow as I wanted it to do. And because time penalty isn't that big of a deal, sure, getting 7,000 points in penalty is pretty huge, and it's still like 2,000 more than someone who completed the run in like 40 minutes. But in addition, or at least in reserve for that, what I got was a huge exploration bonus, a huge swag bonus, and both rushes without even having to worry about how fast I'm going. And I definitely think that's the wrong way to approach things. So this was maybe more of a discussionary episode in some regard. I definitely wanted to raise some of these points. I definitely am interested in what you think about these dailies. Obviously a lot of you who are watching I've talked to, and you're pretty much the consistent daily players, and you definitely saw the thread and you know what's going on. But if some of you haven't seen the thread, or maybe haven't ever considered these things, I would definitely be interested in your perspective on dailies, maybe what needs to be changed. If you think they're perfect, I would also like to hear that, because I think that's definitely a valid way to look at things, because this is just essentially, you can make an argument that this is the core Isaac experience, as this is how the game is meant to be played. And if you want to break the game and score based on that, that should be equated to the part of the game, because that's essentially what Isaac is, using the knowledge you have to just break the game and get a lot of points that way. I'm trying to play the devil's advocate here. Obviously I maybe not necessarily don't hold these views, but if you do have them, I would be interested in your arguments or why you think that way. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.